Site selection is somewhat of an oxymoron because it's a process of not selection, but elimination. I was on calls this morning on aerospace-related projects because of SpaceX and other things. That industry will continue to emerge, and logistics providers will have to understand and be adaptable in that regard. One interesting project was
BJ Simon is the president and CEO of Baytown-West Chambers County Economic Development Foundation. He helps companies navigate site selection, investment opportunities, and expansion into the Baytown and Chambers County region while supporting industrial growth, infrastructure development, and long-term economic development.
When we think about ExxonMobil, they've been here for over 100 years. The economic term that we describe is agglomeration. Agglomeration is a clustering of industries that bring with it certain externalities that attract co-location and also complementary location in those specific sectors.
For companies that are on the fence, what is the one thing you would tell them to get them over that hurdle?
Growth potential. That would be the one word.
If you marked out the most important 30 miles in America, you'd find them around Baytown, Texas. Well, as it relates to chemical logistics, that is. This area has more petrochemical production capacity than anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere, and more pipeline infrastructure than any other region in the country. Right now, there's more investment in energy transition and advanced manufacturing than most people outside the Gulf Coast realize. But here is what most outsiders miss. The communities here are shaping the industry, from the workforce programs to the infrastructure investments. Pull up a chair. I'm your host, Alexander Boehm. Let's talk about it. On today's episode, we are zooming out from the plant floor and looking at the bigger picture of why the Metro East region, and Baytown in particular, is positioned to lead the next chapter of chemical logistics and industrial growth on the Gulf Coast. This is a conversation about what happens when industry and the people who live next to it work in tandem. BJ Simon runs the Baytown-West Chambers County Economic Development Foundation. His job is to make this region work for the companies that operate here and the people who will call it home. Welcome to Talk About It, BJ. Let's get into it. Thank you very much, BJ, for joining me today on the Talk About podcast. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy week to stop by here. We would like to talk about a little bit about the state of Metro East. For people who aren't familiar with the Baytown, Chambers County region, can you paint a picture for us? What does the industrial landscape look like here?
Certainly. The area that we refer to as Metro East is all of Baytown proper and all of Chambers County. That includes the extraterritorial jurisdiction. We've been trying to socialize that concept since 2019 to distinguish our area and economy from the greater Houston metro. The industrial landscape is robust. Anybody who drives around and looks at the verticality, not only in this park, but in the surrounding communities, substantial petrochemical complex. Of course, our area is home to ExxonMobil's petrochemical complex. Midstream sector in the Mount Bellevue area is substantial, represented by Enterprise Products and Targa and One Oak and Energy Transfer Partners. And then you've got this significant logistics hub that's here that's just a stone's throw away from Port Houston. So on an integrated basis, it's a very unique area in geography, not only in the United States, but in the global supply chain.
Awesome. Thank you for that overview. What are some of the biggest investments happening here in the region that people outside the Gulf region might not be tracking?
I mentioned the midstream sector. That sector, with respect to natural gas liquids, has really reemerged post-COVID. You have players like Targa and One Oak and Enterprise Products that are investing or working projects right now that total over $1 billion. Another area is energy. The NRG is building what is called Cedar Bayou 5. It's a 760 megawatt generation facility on their Cedar Bayou plant, along with continued upgrades in the downstream sector with ExxonMobil and Chevron Phillips, Covestro as well. Covestro is now part of the XRG family. They were acquired by ADNOC, and that sale closed at the end of last year. And so the downstream sector continues to be very active as well.
Awesome. Sounds like a really active region when it comes to midstream and upstream activity.
On an integrated basis, but upstream as well. We have oil and gas or all country tubular goods production, and it's a Boris and Mannesmann, which is a Turkish firm that's here. Tenaris is also here as well, and so they provide the drill pipe for downstream exploration.
Awesome. Talk a little bit about the geographical location when a company decides to build a facility in this region. What's drawing them here? What does Metro East offer that other industrial corridors maybe not?
We try to describe the advantages that exist here that have existed here for over a century. When we think about ExxonMobil, they've been here for over 100 years. The economic term that we describe is agglomeration. Agglomeration is a clustering of industries that bring with it certain externalities that attract co-location and also complementary location in those specific sectors. And so you've got robust infrastructure, energy. Of course, Port Houston is integral to any sort of economic picture that we paint here. Rail, we've got the UP, the BNSF, and then people. The ability to attract and deploy people in a predictable manner is also very attractive for entities that are seeking this area.
Port Houston plays a strong role into the development of Metro East. Can you talk a little bit more about what exactly Port Houston is contributing?
Yes, absolutely. Port Houston is a significant economic driver, not only locally in the United States, but also nationally, and with respect to containerized traffic. And so from where we're sitting right now, it's only about 8 miles to Port Houston. And so it's a very substantial and a significant element in consideration for attracting industry and also retaining industry. Our focus a lot as an economic development entity, we focus on business retention and expansion. We do a lot of attraction, but because of the economic base and the industrial base and the clustering that I mentioned before with respect to agglomeration, the ability for Port Houston to continue to expand its capacity complements everything that the current industry profile wants to seek, but also others that want to come in as well. So
the next segment is focusing on community and industry. And before we dive into that, could you explain to us what the Economic Development Foundation is exactly doing? Maybe a little introduction before we talk about community and industry.
The foundation is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. We were established in 1986. We represent the city of Baytown, Chambers County, Harris County, Port Houston, and industry partners as it relates to economic development. Our mission is to spur economic growth, and we've been doing that for the last 40 years. And so our board is made up of 35 members, which essentially has representation of the entire economy on our board. And so we are facilitators and mediators of economic growth, essentially.
Talking about community and industry, there's often tension between industrial growth and community well-being. How does Metro East navigate that topic?
Well, there's no tension. I mean, Baytown and the industrial profile here, there's harmony between residential development and community development. And as long as an entity is not doing anything that is counter to the community's expectations with respect to being a good corporate partner, they'll be accepted.
When a company shows up and says it wants to be part of the community, how do you know it means it?
Behavior. And I think TALKE would be, and not self-serving, but TALKE is a very good example of that. I mean, we worked with Alfred, with the TALKE family when they were looking at locations, and their behavior coincides with what they spoke about when they wanted to come into the area. So people can share their shared values, they can spout their corporate values and the like, but if they don't act in a manner that's consistent with that, well, then the community is going to call them out on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk a little bit about the talent pool that is available here. What does the talent pipeline look like in the corridor, and what can be done to strengthen it?
Well, we routinely, as part of site selection processes, tout a 30 and 60-mile labor shed. And to the untrained eye, or folks who come in, particularly with respect to foreign direct investment, they want to see density of population in close proximity to their operations. But once we can demonstrate through GPS data and other tools that people will drive 30 minutes or 30 miles or 60 minutes and 60 miles, irrespective of shift, to come to work as long as the pay is competitive, benefits packages are competitive. Some of the constraints with respect to talent right now are associated with crafts and trades, welders, pipe fitters, and the like, and that's going to continue to be a challenge, if you will, because of all the demand that's here. When we think about data center construction and other large projects that EPCs are seeking to hire talent, it's a constraint there. And so the ability to deploy talent is another thing too. So we've been working over the last several years to identify pockets of potential employees, working in concert with Lee College and other community colleges to be able to say, okay, if you have the ability to go and provide transportation, go get these people, bring them in, integrate them as part of their own internal training and development framework, you can find the people. So I think it's an issue that can be surmounted, but it's going to continue to be a challenge because All the EPCs that are here are also working in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, and the like along the Gulf Coast. And so we have to be able to at least show them that the entities that are here are willing to provide the time, dollars, and opportunity for training and development.
Awesome. You mentioned Lee College, and you have your finger on the pulse when it comes to economic development. How do you exchange information with Lee College on in which direction the development is going?
Well, we try to involve them in every site selection process, particularly for prospects that are coming in to talk about what Lee College can do. So we're providing them insight. We serve in their advisory boards across various disciplines on an annual basis to give them that intelligence. We're currently actually working on some strategic initiatives as it relates to logistics and distribution in that regard. And it's been challenging for them because, logistics and distribution means different things to different people. As you know, there's so many subcategories and stratifications across that area. And so they're trying to address, or in the past, they've tried to address it as a one-size-fits-all approach, and that is not the case. So we've been given the guidance to at least convening or setting up meetings so that people can understand, or they can understand that there are differences and distinctions that have across, that entire sector. So
you spoke about the site selection process. So that's a very interesting topic because that is the majority of your work. Companies from overseas, you're basically the first contact when they come here. So what services and help do you provide to those companies?
Yeah, site selection is somewhat of an oxymoron because it's a process of not selection, but elimination. And so when we're contacted a lot because of the assets that are here, the largest industrial, master plan industrial park and Exxon, on and on and on. And so at that first level of selection is already there. People want to be here, but then they're competing sites. And so we try to provide them information with respect to labor, incentives, cost of operations, just a number of categories, essentially 8 categories of information, transportation infrastructure, all those things, beyond a selling point. And this is going to sound sort of paradoxical, if you will, but we do not market. We advise and educate because when people get to a level of down selecting, sites, they want to get cut to the chase and want to provide them with objective information to be able to make the decision.
What do you see as the average time from somebody contacting you until they break ground here in the area?
Well, it's a range. I mean, I've seen due diligence, depending on the type of project. If it's a chemical manufacturing facility, I've seen projects take 5 years. I've seen projects, one example is in this park, the Samika Semiconductor facility. Is probably one of the fastest decision-making from the time that the site was selected, and construction is about 10 months. So, I mean, it all depends. And if folks are looking for existing facilities, we can provide guidance in that regard. MSI down the street is a classic example of that. So it's a range of things. We try to flatten that as quickly as possible to be able to provide information along those 8 categories, as I mentioned before. Economic development is very competitive, and particularly along the Gulf Coast. And one of the things that we've also been working on and socializing since 2019 is contextualizing this economy within the concept of mega regions. Back in 2009, the Metropolitan Planning Organization in New York identified 11 mega regions in this country. The 2 of interest for us are the Gulf Coast and the Texas Triangle. And when we look at a map of the convergence of the Gulf Coast, what that looks like, and then the Texas Triangle and those cities that make that up, we're right in the middle of that. We're at that nexus. And so we've been talking about mega regions to our board. I think our board gets it. But then prospects that come in also benefit from understanding that dynamic, because as of 2025, the combined population of the Gulf Coast and Texas Triangle mega region was 42 million people. So that is a lot of people within essentially a short area, right? And so we try to contextualize and inform that if you come here and you have the potential to address a number of things, people, product, transportation, on and on and on, but every economy has its own physics. And so the fact that you have that many people across a diverse range of businesses, that dynamism or an individual's company will benefit from that dynamism. So
great. We spoke about site selection. We spoke about the workforce environment. One interesting aspect probably for companies that don't know the US market environment is permitting, for example, right? So how do you support these companies when they come to you and they look for a site here and then moves into the next stage? How do you help them to build the connections to work through the legislative side of things?
Yeah, in Texas, the critical path typically, depending on industry type, will be the TCEQ for environmental permitting. Here in Chambers County, in the Baytown area, permitting is fairly straightforward. I mean, we've seen decreased cycle times from 90 days to approximately 30 to 45 days. And for someone coming from California, for example, or from the Northeast, they find that incredible. Yes, you can get permitting for a project. Yes, you can, because of the ordinances that are currently in place and the standards. And so our work in that regard is to help navigate folks. There are standing venues called development review committees that both the city of Baytown stewards and Chambers County stewards, not so much in Harris County, not besmirching Harris County, but it's much more complex to do work in Harris County as compared to Chambers County. And so our work, again, is to mediate and navigate and facilitate in that regard.
Great. Looking forward, from your perspective, where is this region headed to in the next 5 to 10 years? What industry or investments should logistics companies keep an eye out for?
That's a very good question. And again, putting a plug for TALKE, Richard Heath is on our board, and Richard, we've had some discussions, and Richard can speak to this. So we have undertaken an effort over the last year or so, what we're calling Horizon 2035. It's sort of a study of studies. We've tried to collapse about 25 to 30 analyses that have been conducted not only by us, but City of Baytown and others. And we've developed what are called the vision trends, and there are 5 of them. We see that this area in particular, our service area, the Baytown or Metro East, is in the middle of 2 growing MSAs, the Houston MSA to the west, the Beaumont-Port Arthur MSA to the east. And so if we envision sort of a Venn diagram, we are right in the middle of that. And so those growth patterns are going to continue to, and both MSAs, to create some sort of compression. And that compression has to be managed. And so our work on behalf of our stakeholders, typically the county and the city, is to provide this sort of strategic foresight, in that regard. As for the question is what industries are going to manifest, well, you're going to continue to see expansion in the petrochemical industry. One of the vision trends is to help facilitate continued growth and industrial growth, the midstream sector, the downstream sector, and all those areas that are here. One dynamic that's occurring within this idea of agglomeration is a diversification within that. And so you see elements like advanced recycling, circular plastics. Of course, TALKE is involved in that and continue. That's going to continue more and more. So you'll see some innovations within that. And so you've got diversification within agglomeration. But other areas are beginning to emerge. I was on calls this morning on aerospace-related projects that, because of SpaceX and other things. That industry will continue to emerge, and logistics providers will have to, understand and be adaptable in that regard. One interesting project was the manufacturer of rockets on the eastern seaboard barged to an area for hydro testing. Hydro testing is common in this area because of the vessels that are here, and requiring 250 to 300 foot towers, which are not tolerated in certain areas of the country, but very common here. And then once validated and verified and certified, being placed either on rail. I guess the analog would be a wind turbine blade, for example, or on barge and like. So those logistics, these are common practices. However, I think with the advent of and the dispersion of artificial intelligence, different requirements are going to emerge, be they liquid or hard form or otherwise. And so I think logistics companies should adapt the same approach that we have some sort of futurist or strategic foresight to make predictions and test some things, and also do a lot of benchmarking internationally. So for entities that have international relationships, to see how folks are managing throughput and supply chain management in their areas, to try to, transfer those and adopt those here locally.
Yeah, awesome. You just used the word AI. Everybody is talking about artificial intelligence nowadays. What do you see here for the region? What role AI is going to play in the further development?
I think from a macro perspective, you will see AI being used for utility planning. CenterPoint Energy is deploying AI in a huge way for predictive modeling, particularly since Hurricane Beryl and some of the things that happened there for hardening their infrastructure. And so you see industries doing that on a macro perspective, units of government doing that. On a micro perspective, I'm sure I'm sure it applies to TALKE as well. Individual companies are deploying AI in a way to enhance productivity, not necessarily displace people, but to augment, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're using augmented intelligence as a term, because that's essentially what's doing. I mean, artificial intelligence is a term of art, but they cannot replace humans. And so any sort of collaborative interaction with AI, we would see that industry is doing, but also we would hope and help engender thinking that units of government and other entities would also look at it that way as well. I think that predictive modeling related to transportation, to give or spark imagination on the part of politicians and state legislators and so forth and so on to think beyond their current paradigms is going to be key. And I hope that emerges, and we help facilitate that. We plan to do some things in the next legislative session to try to plant seeds of thought, because if we had to identify one large constraint in the United States is the lack of a cogent mass transit system, not only here locally, but here across the nation as well. So
I really like the term augmented intelligence. Yes. That's, I think, really reflecting well where the industry is heading to. So for companies that are on the fence about moving here into the area, what is the one thing you would tell them to maybe get them over that hurdle?
Growth. Come, take a look, right? Even now, even as recently as 2 weeks ago, people have presuppositions about the Houston region that just do not align with reality. I think some people think you're looking for people riding on horses and for longhorn cattle all over the place, and that sort of thing, even today. And so I think that growth potential, because of the dynamics that I mentioned earlier about mega regions and the like, that would be the one word. If you're seeking to grow your business long term, this is the place to be.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That's going to do it for this conversation today. BJ, thanks for giving us the big picture on what's happening here in the region. So for our audience, if companies would like to get in touch with you, where's the best place to go?
BaytownEDF.org.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for spending your time with me today.
My pleasure.
It was really a great conversation. Thank you. If you're in Baytown, we'd love to connect in person. Reach out at info.talke.com/podcast to set that up. If you're not in Baytown, we put together something special for you. We have developed a free visibility checklist with 10 questions to ask any logistics provider before you sign. It takes about 5 minutes, and it will tell you real quick whether your current partner can actually see what's happening with your shipments. Anyone can download it for free now at info.talke.com/podcast. Until next time, I'm your host, Alexander Boehm. Thanks for joining the Talk About Podcast.